Jorge Torres Jr. and Sarah Boone had a rocky relationship, to say the least. It was marked by frequent arguments and heavy drinking. Friends and family were aware of the volatile nature of their relationship, often wondering why they stayed together, but despite the constant conflict, they did. Prior to the incident we're going to get into, both George and Sarah had been arrested multiple times for domestic violence against each other, but despite this, they always got back together, often bailing each other out of prison. On February the 24th, 2020, the couple's toxic dynamic reached a fatal breaking point. After a night of drinking, Sarah claimed that George had willingly climbed into a large suitcase because they thought it would be funny. She said she zipped him inside, thinking it was all in good fun, and then passed out, leaving him trapped overnight. The next morning, Sarah found George unresponsive in the suitcase and called 911.
My boyfriend and I were playing last night, and I put him in his case and we were playing, and like kind of hide and seek kind of thing. So I fell asleep, and I woke up, and he was dead in the suitcase, so I don't know what happened.
When paramedics arrived, it was too late. George was pronounced dead at the scene. Sarah's account of the incident seemed simple, a tragic accident resulting from a drunken game, but as detectives began to investigate, they found themselves questioning the plausibility of her story. The morning after the incident, Sarah's 911 call conveyed panic, but detectives were immediately skeptical of her account. The idea that George had willingly climbed into the suitcase only to suffocate overnight seemed improbable, to say the least. Furthermore, Sarah's behaviour during the investigation raised serious red flags. Her emotions fluctuated from angry to calm, and her story kept changing. As detectives interviewed neighbours, they learned that the couple's relationship was far more volatile than Sarah had let on. Reports of loud arguments, and Sarah and George's violent tendencies when drinking painted a disturbing picture. The autopsy report that would follow only deepened the suspicion. George's injuries were consistent with prolonged asphyxiation, and there were signs that he had struggled to escape the suitcase. Bruises on his body suggested a desperate, unsuccessful attempt to free himself. With these findings, investigators began to view George's death as not just a tragic accident, but a deliberate act of cruelty. The focus of the investigation shifted from understanding how George died to uncovering why and whether it had been intentional. The investigation took a decisive turn when detectives discovered a video on Sarah Boone's phone. The video, recorded during the night of George's death, captured him pleading to be let out of the suitcase, repeatedly saying he couldn't breathe. In the background, Sarah's voice could be heard mocking him, telling him this was his punishment for everything he had done, including cheating on her.
For everything you've done to me.
Sarah.
For everything you've done to me.
Sarah. Sarah.
Stupid.
Sarah.
That's my name. Don't wear it up.
This damning piece of evidence shattered any remaining doubts about the nature of George's death. It was clear that Sarah had been fully aware of his distress and had chosen to ignore it. In the disturbing video, you can hear the fear in George's voice as he realises that Sarah is not messing around. Trapped in a very uncomfortable position and unable to move, he ultimately suffocated to death, perhaps one of the worst claustrophobic deaths I have ever come across. Armed with this evidence, detectives arrested Sarah and charged her with second-degree murder. After her 8th lawyer withdrew, Sarah had forfeited the right to a court-appointed counsel and is now required to represent herself in court. She is anticipated to use the battered woman defence during her trial, which is scheduled for October the 7th, 2024. On the afternoon of January the 13th, 2019, the Roselló family, which consisted of Jorge Roselló and Victoria Garcia, and their 2-year-old son Julen Garcia, travelled to a relative's property in Tortallán, Malaga. Tortallán is a small village in Spain, known for its scenic views of the surrounding mountains and peaceful rural atmosphere. However, this ordinary day quickly turned into a nightmare in a matter of seconds. Whilst his mother was on the phone to work and his father was prepping food for the picnic, Julen was playing near the property when he wandered off. As he walked through the hills near the house, he fell into a narrow, uncovered well. The well, only 25 centimetres in diameter and more than 100 metres deep, had been illegally drilled by a former resident in search of water, but was left uncovered and unmarked. His father, who heard him scream, ran to the well as hikers who had heard the screams nearby rang for help. The rescue operation that followed was one of the most challenging and complex in Spain's history. The well's narrow diameter made it impossible for rescues to descend directly, and the depth presented further difficulties. Despite the urgency, rescuers had to proceed carefully to avoid causing further collapse within the well that could endanger Julen's life even more. Specialised teams, including mining experts, were called in to dig a parallel tunnel next to the well, hoping to reach the child. Throughout the operation, the entire country watched anxiously as updates streamed in. For days, rescuers worked around the clock, using every available resource to reach the boy. The operation required sophisticated engineering solutions, including the use of explosives to create the horizontal passage that would allow rescuers to reach the bottom of the well. Meanwhile, Julen's parents, Jose and Victoria, remained at the site, clinging to hope as the hours turned into days. Their anguish was plain to see as the world watched in solidarity, but the situation grew increasingly dire. After 13 days of intense work, on the night of January the 26th, rescuers finally reached the bottom of the well. The hopes of a miracle had faded, and the reality of the situation became clear. Julen had not survived the fall. His body was at a depth of 70 meters, trapped and wedged deep within the hole since the day that he fell. The autopsy revealed he had suffered severe head trauma due to the fall. Whether or not he died instantly is unknown, but experts presume that he did. The news devastated the entire nation. The tragic outcome was a bitter blow to not only his family, but to the rescue teams who had worked tirelessly, and also to the millions who had followed the story hoping for a different ending. In the days that followed, Julen's parents received an outpouring of support across Spain and around the world. The country mourned with them, grieving for the little boy whose life was cut short in such a tragic way. Our final story brings us to the Twitchen House Holiday Park in Woolacombe. The Twitchen House Holiday Park in North Devon is a popular family destination known for its scenic beauty. The park's picturesque setting, nestled between the lush woodlands and the stunning Woolacombe beach, provides a perfect backdrop for families seeking a peaceful retreat. Among these holiday makers who arrived at the park in late August of 2023 was Robert Channelle, a 34-year-old former airspace operative from Bristol. Robert and his wife Nicole were celebrating their 11th year anniversary and were planning to get married later on in the year. They were also with their 2 children. Nicole described Robert as once being a very strong man who spent his time in the gym lifting weights outside of his airspace operative job, which he loved. However, in 2018, Robert was diagnosed with a brain tumour. To treat this, he had to have surgery, but the surgery was complicated and resulted in him losing his sight. His physical and mental health were greatly affected by this also. After recovering from this, they found out that the brain tumour had progressed to stage 3, which would require yet again more surgery. This tumour would result in Robert having seizures, which were further amplified after he was electrocuted at his home by the plug of their rowing machine. On the night of his death, Robert and Nicole had been out for a walk with their kids before joining other family members at the bar. They enjoyed a night out before heading back to their caravan to get some sleep. After putting the children to bed, Robert and Nicole went to go to sleep in separate rooms. The following morning, Nicole walked into her husband's room and was greeted with a horrific sight. Robert was wedged in a tight gap between the caravan wall and his bed. An ambulance was called and resuscitation attempts were tried but failed. Sadly, the investigation into his death would reveal that the night Robert got home he had a seizure which caused him to slip off of his bed and straight into a tight gap between the bed and the wall. He didn't die from the seizure, but due to the gap being so tight, it restricted his ability to breathe. The coroner said he had been diagnosed with a brain tumour 4 years previously and suffered from seizures as a result. On the night of his death, he suffered a further seizure, causing him to slip in bed and fall between the bed and a tight gap by the wall. Following his death, a GoFundMe was set up to help with funeral expenses, reaching over £5,000. His heartbroken friend, Keela Waken, said, "You would always know that he was there. He had a big presence. Everyone knew about if Rob was there. He was a brilliant bloke. He did as much as he could do for the boys. I think Nicole was also a fantastic mother. She's amazing. That was her life. It was his life. Their life was each other. May he rest in peace." As always, this is not an AI channel, I do everything myself, and if you appreciate my work, subscribe, and if you want to go the extra step to support the channel, maybe consider becoming a member. If you like this video, this is the 4th edition in this series, so make sure to check out the others. The last one had a collaboration with Disturbing. Let me know what you think about this video in the comments below, and as always, thank you for watching.